This week on Mountaineer Game Day Extra, injuries continue to batter WVU football. We'll bring you the latest injury update and examine what's ahead for the Mountaineers down the stretch.
Plus, basketball season begins in just a couple of weeks. We'll give you our early predictions on Bob Huggins' team and answer your questions during Ask MGD Extra. That and more right now on Mountaineer Game Day Extra.
Anjelica, Trinone, and Nick Farrell here with you on a brand new episode of Mountaineer Game Day Extra. A tough October slate continues to get even more challenging for the Mountaineers as the injury list continues to grow. West Virginia coming off a 52-14 loss at number 5 Oklahoma last week. And boy, Nick, did this bye week come at a good time for the Mountaineers. Talking about those injuries, we will start there, it seems, every week. Unfortunately, we're having to provide this injury update. But Coach Brown said on Tuesday that after missing the past 2 games due to a muscle injury, he does anticipate cornerback Keith Washington being able to return to the lineup in that game up against Baylor. And another injury on the defensive side for West Virginia in that game at Oklahoma. Linebacker Josh Chandler came out in the first half. He was sidelined for the rest of the game. Coach Brown said he will not play up against Baylor. He's not entirely sure how many games he will miss, but he does expect him to at least be out for the next month. And that is just one other guy, Nick, in this growing injury list, especially on the defensive side of the ball for the Mountaineers.
Yeah, it continues to snowball, really, Anjelica. 2, Quandarius Qualls is going to be questionable for that game against Baylor. There's a couple of other guys, too, in that mix. Those are probably the most notable, especially Chandler, the guy who is one of West Virginia's leading tacklers. It's a big loss for WVU, and it comes after an incredibly difficult stretch, a daunting stretch for West Virginia that really hasn't ended yet. We're not going to talk too much about Baylor this week. We'll save that for next week's program. Of course, that game coming up on Halloween, Mountaineers at Baylor on Halloween at 8 Eastern on ESPN. I mean, that's a game against another unbeaten team. West Virginia goes from taking on Oklahoma, the best offense in the country, to taking on Baylor, which really has become the surprise team in the Big 12 that's competing for a spot in the Big 12 championship game. But right now, this week, the focus for WVU is another self-scout. That was the theme back in September during the team's first bye week. And it is so again for West Virginia this week because the Mountaineers are coming off a 3-game losing streak entering this bye week. And as Coach Brown put it earlier this week during his press conference, the Mountaineers just have lacked consistency overall, have not played a game where they've been consistently good in one particular phase all season. In fact, the last 3 third quarters this team has played, they've been shut out. And that's going to be the focus for West Virginia this week. As Brown told us, he wants to find a way for West Virginia to get some consistency some way, somehow down the stretch this season.
We haven't been consistent in really any phase for an entire game yet. Some of that can be due to youth. Some of that could be due to opponents, whatever. But our consistency hasn't been what you would want it to be as a coach. As far as our red zone defense has not been very good. We haven't got as many takeaways defensively as we traditionally would. Offensively, our inability to run the football, our lack of explosive plays have been our Achilles heel.
There may be no WVU football game this weekend, but the Neil Brown Show continues. Nick sits down with special guest WVU punter Josh Groudon this weekend on a brand new episode of the Neil Brown Show. That and so much more coming your way. It first airs on Friday night at 5 p.m. on AT&T Sportsnet, and we'll be back on Saturday starting at 9 a.m. on your local Nexstar station.
A reminder, no Mountaineer Game Day this week, but we will be back Thursday for a special Thursday night edition when WVU takes on Baylor in Waco on Halloween. And as always, a very special thanks to our friends at the Varsity Club across town. Catering services for MGD Extra are provided by the Varsity Club Sports Tavern of Morgantown. No out-of-town guest this week since WVU is on a bye, so we're going to jump right ahead to Ask MGD Extra and bring in Sam. How's it going, man?
It's going all right. No football this weekend, so I'm a little bummed out, but we got the bye week, obviously. So we met up with Neil Brown earlier this week on Tuesday to see what his thoughts are on the bye week. Nick, would you give us a little bit of what the plan is for this bye week?
Yeah, so we touched on it at the beginning of the show, and if there's one, maybe two focuses for WVU, it's got to be to get healthy, number one, and that's definitely going to be the goal for the Mountaineers. We rattled off that growing list of injuries. It's very important for this team to get as healthy as possible, but the second thing is to continue building up that depth for WVU, because as Coach Brown indicated, with so many guys hurt, the expectation is a few of them will be back for the Baylor game and for that stretch run in November. But this is definitely an opportunity for a lot of players to continue to make an impact. We've talked at length about the amount of true freshmen that have had to step in, especially on defense in the secondary. There could be more opportunities for players either because of injury or because we're getting to the end of the season now, where with only 5 games to go, you're going to see players who are true freshmen take advantage of that redshirt rule, where they can appear in up to 4 games and still maintain their eligibility. Coach Brown has noted that could be in effect for a number of guys at a number of different positions, so you're likely to see a lot of lineup changes at some point just to get guys more experience before the season ends. Coach Brown really wants to take advantage of that new redshirt rule, and it's a smart play because it gets guys that experience that ordinarily wouldn't have it as they continue to try to build this program up.
Yeah, obviously reset, refocus, recover, all important here in this bye week for West Virginia. We talk about some of the injuries, but a lot of these young guys that are going in are having to switch around some positions. We saw it last week at Oklahoma because Hakeem Bailey was out for the first half of that game. So some players switching around and then having to go back to a different position. You've got a lot of young guys in there, but something that Coach Brown said earlier this week, you'll hear more from him on the Neil Brown Show as well coming up, Nick. He had said something along the lines of, right now we're not using the term freshman or redshirt freshman around here in this program because you're 7 games into the season. West Virginia has relied on a lot of these younger guys to be able to step up. You talk about maybe seeing some guys, the redshirt rule being used here, and Coach Brown said that maybe it's because some of the veterans just aren't able to produce like they thought that they would at the beginning of the season. So we knew this really coming into the year, that it was going to be a young, inexperienced WVU football team. A great opportunity for some of those young guys to get reps at Oklahoma. Only going to be beneficial here down the stretch for West Virginia. But something else that I want to see over the bye week as well, WVU's got to figure out something offensively. Struggling to run the ball, really struggling in the pass game as well to get any type of deep passes, finding any type of success. WVU needs to find an answer for this over the bye weekend, or we're going to be, five games here left in the season. It's going to continue to be a long, drawn-out 5 games for these Mountaineers.
Yeah, that it will. And it's been a tough stretch so far through October, so it'll be good to see them get back on the right track after the bye week if they can. But now switching gears a little bit, Bob Huggins and his boys are out in Kansas City right now, getting ready for the basketball season at Big 12 Media Days. Anjelica, do you think they're going to make a run at the tournament again this year?
We're already talking tournament time. Okay.
Yeah, never too early to talk about.
Yeah, I know
March
everybody's
6th,
like, let's talk about basketball. But, here's the thing. I don't know if I necessarily want to give an answer in that per se. Do I think that this team will be better and be able to make more of a run than it did last year? Yes, but another thing that you also have to remember with this basketball team, it's young as well. A lot of its returners are sophomores who really got thrown into the fire last season, but then some other guys who are coming in who really maybe only have experience at the junior college level and don't really have it up against this type of competition. But I think one thing that will be able to get West Virginia back to where it used to be in postseason contention, maybe a run in the Big 12 Conference Tournament like it did last year, is Coach Huggins has said there's a lot of guys on this team that can shoot. Defense needs a little work, but you have to think, when you look at Oscar Tshiebwe and Derek Culver, this team has something that it maybe hasn't had in the past couple years, and that is certainly size, and that's going to be important for West Virginia. All in all, I'm just looking forward to seeing the strides that this team has made since last season. We talk about ending on a high note. I know there was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on last year with WVU basketball that really had an impact in the way that it played on the court. We've heard this year these guys are a really together group. They want to win. Like Coach Huggins had said at the Gold Blue debut, let's do it a heck of a lot better than last year. I think we're all looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned this on Mountaineer Gameday Extra before, that I think that West Virginia should have sights on an NCAA tournament appearance this year for a number of reasons. And one of them is the fact that West Virginia has so many guys that went through growing pains last year that now know what it's going to take to be in that category, right? WVU only won 15 games last year and played in the CBI. You ask NCAA tournament or NIT. West Virginia is probably going to be, just my opinion, if we want to really look 6 months down the road here, West Virginia is probably a team that's going to be on the bubble for most of the season, right? I don't think that WVU is going to be back to where it was when it had Javon Carter and Dexter Miles Jr. running the show, but I do think the Mountaineers are going to be way, way better than they were last season. And I also think that some of the learning that those players went through, some of that really tough stuff that WVU's now returning veterans had to go through last year is going to be helpful to guide players like Oscar Shibwe and some of the other newcomers too, because last year maybe there was some there was a lot going on, as you said, behind the scenes for WVU last year. A couple of players were dismissed from the program. Several others have now transferred since the end of last season. But I think that this year, the thing that we're hearing time and again from Coach Huggins and the players is that this group really has a sense of togetherness that maybe wasn't quite there last season. That's good for the players who have been there, that love to play together and will thrive together. It's also extremely good for the newcomers who are going to have to find their role within the team. So that's why I think that just based on the skill, yes, that's returning, that's a really positive thing, but the togetherness that this team seems to have so far is what's more reminiscent of some of those teams in the past, just a couple of years ago that Huggins had that went to the NCAA tournament.
Well, I think since the last time we had a chance to talk, right, the Big 12 Conference polls and preseason
right.
honors were announced. Is that correct? So WVU men's hoops picked to finish 5th in the conference, of course, for the 9th straight season. It was Kansas that was picked to finish there up at the top. But Oscar Shibwe, the preseason All Big 12 freshman of the year, we had a chance to talk to him earlier in practice. I know you and I were laughing at some of his quotes after that. People had asked him about the recognition, and he said he's not really paying too much attention to the recognition because he knows that there's a lot that he needs to work on. But something funny that he did say is there's some friendly competition between he and Derek Culver happening right now. So we talk about the togetherness of this team. These are guys that seem to be having a lot of fun together, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch that transpire out on the court.
Just really quickly, a final note on this subject. How many times has Coach Huggins, after a game, lamented about how many McDonald's All-Americans Kansas has, right? That's his go-to, right? All the McDonald's All-Americans, they always go play for Bill Self at Kansas. This year, Huggins is the guy that has the marquee freshman in the Big 12. That's rare for WVU, and it's something that fans shouldn't take for granted, I don't think. I mean, I know we haven't seen Shibwe suit up yet for WVU beyond the Gold Blue debut. He hasn't played in a real game yet for the Mountaineers. We don't quite know what he's going to be capable of in Big 12 play just yet. But WVU fans should not take for granted the fact that Shibwe is here and can make an immediate impact. You know, last year when Derek Culver, after he served a suspension at the beginning of the season, he played in his first game. It was pretty clear from the start that Culver was the best player that WVU had last year. I don't know if we're going to see the same thing from Shibwe, right? I'm not a fortune teller. I can't tell you if the same thing is going to happen. But the fact that those two guys are going to get to play next to each other this year is just such an incredible prospect for WVU fans. It's really exciting.
It's definitely a lot of variables heading into this season, a lot of question marks. But one thing that's not a variable is that you should follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, everything at WV Illustrated. We'll have the latest news on the Mountaineers, WVIllustrated.com. So hit us up on digital. We will have all the latest.
Segue Sam.
Segue Sam. I like that a lot. Super Segue Sam. Well, just really quickly, though, we're coming into the really busy part of the calendar for WVU sports, right? We've got football, men's and women's soccer all reaching the peak of their seasons, the climax of their seasons, and then we're going to have men's and women's hoops start up the first week of November. I believe women's basketball November 7th, I think, is the home opener. The night after, it's WVU versus, I believe, Akron on November 8th. Some home hoops, and then on November 15th is the pit game too for WVU. So it's really going to get here very quickly, and we're going to have you covered throughout this really hectic time for us in October and November when everything overlaps. But it is a lot of fun, and it's going to continue to be for sure.
Maybe the next couple weeks you'll see us with a lot more coffee.
A lot more coffee.
Sitting here on the desk
with
a lot happening.
A lot more food from the varsity club as well.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Keep that
that's
coming.
Good. That's good fuel. We're going to go back to football now for just a second. Check in with Dale Wolfley for his Howl of the Week.
This is your MGD Extra. You know what it is. Howl, that's right, baby. Let's go and roll it right here. Check out my man here, Michael Laughlin, redshirt freshman. We are forming, the Mountaineers are forming a tight end and developing him right here. Let's take a look here. You're going to see actually him and Giovanni has to come over. See O'Loughlin here, he's going to line up with his hands down in the dirt. This is a former wide receiver that is now being addressed to go ahead, put his hand in the dirt and block. It's a whole different world for him right here. But check it out. Now, I'm going to say this. This is not like an incredible job. You're going to see him blow him off the ball. But this is a guy who's developing and just working his can off and just straining, doing everything he can to make the block. Here we go. Roll it. See him come off the ball right here. Check it out. He's strained. Hey, this gets the job done. This is a big defensive tough lineman. Again, he's put on about 30 pounds this year, and that's doing a nice job right there. Again, he's not blowing doors off, but what he did was he gave everything he had, and that's what I like seeing about a young guy. So again, you're gonna see O'Loughlin right here. Now he's gonna do a little bit of a rubber here. They did a ton of it all last week against Iowa State for working out well, but check him out. He takes the hands, gets the defensive back off of him, makes the catch right there. Now get in the end zone and strain, young man. That's still a heck of a job down in the red zone right there. Michael O'Loughlin, I'm telling you guys, he's developing right now, and just get prepared because he's going to be a really good tight end in the future. And that is your MGD Extra. Let me hear it. Boom!
That about does it for us this week on MGD Extra. Don't forget there's new ways for you to find us. We, of course, want you to check us out on WVUillustrated.com and the West Virginia Illustrated Facebook page. But if you have an Apple TV or Roku TV device, you can search for WVU Sports and find MGD Extra there every week. You also can find us on Facebook and Twitter at WV Illustrated. Make sure you download the WV Illustrated app because we'll keep you updated throughout WVU's bye week in the lead up to that game against Baylor and throughout basketball season, which, as we said, begins in just a couple of weeks.
Unfortunately, no football, which means no Mountaineer game day for us this weekend, but the Neil Brown Show does roll on, so make sure to check your local listings. We will be back next week right here on Mountaineer Game Day Extra to get you ready as West Virginia travels to Waco to face the undefeated and nationally ranked Baylor Bears. All that and more coming up for you next week. We hope to see you then.